Okay. So, hello, everyone. Thank you for being a part of CXC 2020. My name is Jersey Drozd. I am the interim executive director of CartoonCrossroadsColumbus.org. I hope everybody's been having a good time this weekend. There's been a lot of really incredible programming coming down the streams and in the Discord. I'm going to get out of the way and let you enjoy this presentation with C. Spike Trotman. I got some housekeeping stuff that I need to do first, just to let everybody know what's happening here. So there we go. Yes, CXC 2020. You may have noticed you have not been charged admission to participate in all this programming, and the reason why is because CXC is a 501(c) nonprofit corporation who largely exists through the support of sponsors and donors, such as the Ohio Arts Council, the Greater Columbus Arts Council, the Columbus Foundation, White Castle, Able, and Feasel, to name a few. We thank them for their support. Also, this festival is an enormous group of people who come together to, they're all people in the business of changing lives, right? The Billy Ireland Cartoon Library and Museum, the Columbus College of Art and Design, who is the host of tonight's event, the Columbus Metropolitan Library, the Columbus Museum of Art, and the Wexner Center for the Arts. We thank all of them for all the incredible work they do to make this rich and just lovely festival that I've been in love with for years. So this is a presentation followed by Q&A. I'm going to play a video, and then Spike's going to be here, and we're going to get to talk with Spike live. You have been automatically muted by the host, which is me, and your video is off. You are going to communicate with the panelists via text, and I'll show you how in a moment. I do also want to say this presentation is being recorded, and it's being simulcast to our Facebook stream, our YouTube stream, and Twitch. How do you participate? Well, there's this chat button at the bottom of the screen of your Zoom webinar, and with that, you can talk amongst yourselves. You can also ask questions, but everybody's going to see your question. If you want to ask a question of the panelists and not have it be for public consumption, you go to the Q&A box, you pop it open, you click it, and this pop-up happens. You can type your question in there, and then the question will appear to the panelists. They'll be able to see them, but the general chat will not. You can also send the question anonymously. So with that, I will close. Thank you once again for being here. And now, enjoy C. Spike Trotman in conversation with Jeff Smith.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's talk with Spike Trotman. I'm Melanie Korn, president of Columbus College of Art and Design. We're so pleased to sponsor tonight's discussion and are happy to have been part of CXC since the beginning. I know that many of you watching already know about CCAD, but for those who don't, allow me to tell you a little bit about us. CCAD is one of the oldest nonprofit art and design colleges in the United States. We were founded in 1879 by 5 women and now have over 1,000 students across 12 BFA and 1 MFA programs. Our mission, similar to CXC's, is to foster a community that educates diverse students so they can unleash their creative power to shape culture and commerce. Graduates from our comics and narrative practice program go on to work as independent artists, writers, publishers, comics illustrators, colorists, letterers, storyboard artists, and character developers for comics, animation, gaming, and toys. I could go on, but I'm going to stop here and let Lauren McCubbin, chair of both CCAD's illustration and comics and narrative practice programs, tell you a bit more about our school and our alumni, many of whom are exhibiting and taking part in CXC this year. Lauren?
Thank you, Dr. Korn, and welcome everyone to our CXC at CCAD Speaker Talk with C. Spike Trotman. I'm excited for all of our students here at CCAD to get to know Spike better. Her work embodies the kind of entrepreneurship and community building that we want our students to exemplify in their own practices. As part of our curriculum in comics and narrative practice, we encourage our students to look outside of traditional modes and methods of publishing. And no one embodies that better than Spike Trotman. Her 26 Kickstarter projects for Iron Circus Comics have raised almost $2 million. And Kickstarter named her one of 7 Kickstarter thought leaders in 2018. Spike has taken that funding success and put it right back into the comics community, giving opportunities to upcoming writers and artists that they might not have gotten via traditional publishing platforms. Spike shows us how much she values our community by literally giving back to them with the proceeds of her campaigns. She makes sure that the page rates for all of her creators go up as her fundraising dollars do. I'm also excited to have Spike interviewed by renowned comics auteur and co-founder and artistic director of Cartoon Crossroads Columbus, Jeff Smith. Jeff knows a little something about building a self-publishing empire, with his comic series Bone selling over 8 million copies worldwide. And with that, I am proud to introduce C. Spike Trotman in conversation with Jeff Smith.
Thank you, Dr. Korn and Lauren. Hello and welcome to CXC 2020 Saturday night. This is the Columbus College of Art and Design Cartoon Forum. I'm Jeff Smith, the creator of the Bone graphic novels and the artistic director of CXC. Tonight's talk is with C. Spike Trotman, cartoonist, writer, artist, publisher, and Kickstarter extraordinaire. If you don't know Iron Spike, as she's known on Twitter, you're in for a surprise. She not only publishes her own work, Spike has proven herself an impressive editor of anthologies with titles like FTL Y'all and Smut Peddler. Through the publishing company she created, Iron Circus Comics, Trotman seeks out creators who have been underrepresented by the mainstream. Recent releases from Iron Circus include Banned Book Club by Kim Hyun-suk and As the Crow Flies by Melanie Gilman. We began our talk with her early days when she was printing up her webcomics and going out on the road and tabling at comic book conventions. A rough slog, as any indie comic artist starting out knows.
Oh, so sometime after that, like in the mid 2000s, you started doing kind of these how-to books, and the first one I think was Warcraft.
Yeah.
So now this is you talking about this is in my life. I'm writing down. This is how I'm surviving. This is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's part instructional, but I'm also sure it was part trying to just deal with it and get it out.
Yeah, it was a combination of, this is the book I wish someone had handed me when I turned 18, because it would have saved me a lot of grief, and also almost kind of like organizing my own thoughts on the subject, because I was, at that point I had figured a few things out and I was looking back, and I wanted to make sure that the life plan I was adhering to made sense. Like if I put this book out and had a piece of advice in it and I got a bunch of feedback that was like, really? What? No? Maybe that'd be good for me. Maybe that'd be helpful in some way. But primarily, its primary purpose was a book like this should exist. I grew up reading Larry Gonick's books, which are Cartoon History of the Universe. And so I was a big believer in the power of educational comics. Like I knew they worked. They're the reasons I got A in high school history, Larry Gonick. And I had this idea for this book, and I would tell people about, oh God, you know what? I wish I had an extra $10,000 lying around, because then I would hire Diana Knopf to illustrate this script that is pretty much already done and sitting there. And this is what it would be about. And I think it's a really good idea and blah, blah, blah. But the money doesn't exist. So whatever, who cares? But it was around that time, maybe 6 months, 10 months later, that I first learned of Kickstarter while literally sitting on a panel for a convention. I was on like a small press panel, and one of the other panelists, a guy named Gordon McAlpin, casually mentioned a brand new site he had just found called Kickstarter. And I was like, what's Kickstarter? And he elaborated, and I was quiet for a minute, and I was just like, cool. And I went home and I looked it up, and I was like, this is perfect. This is exactly what I was looking for, because at that point, I had an audience. I had people who were into what I did, but the kind of money that was in webcomics was something that to this day, I referred to it as secretary money, but quite frankly, that's probably generous, because I'm sure secretaries made more than I did doing like 20 cons a year and selling collected editions of my webcomic. But what's important to note that those collected editions came about because I was already crowdfunding. We weren't calling it that. That word didn't exist, but I was already crowdfunding before Kickstarter existed. And I wasn't alone in that. A whole lot of webcomic people were doing that because this was.
Oh, how? Tell me how you were doing it.
This is like the naughties. It's important to like everyone, we're taking it back here. This is pre-Patreon, pre-Kickstarter. When people were printing their collected editions of their webcomics, what they were doing is they were hand making in Photoshop, because again, pre-Clip Studio Paint, pre-Manga Studio, making these graphics that were thermometers, and they'd stick them up on the top of their sites and be, hey, everyone, it's time to make a collected edition of my webcomic. I got the quote from the printer. It's going to be $5,000, and here's my PayPal. The book is going to cost $12. So PayPal me $12 and I don't know, $5 for shipping. And every day I will manually update the thermometer graphic. And when it hits $5,000, hooray, I'll print the book. And if it doesn't hit $5,000, well, we just won't think about that, you know? And sure, I mean, I did that. All my friends did it. People just funded their books that way, even though technically it was against PayPal policy. And there were cartoonists who lost their PayPal accounts for years for doing this, because you weren't allowed to have a certain amount of time elapse between taking someone's money for something and then delivering. Like there was a finite time between those two periods.
That's probably a good idea, though.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it is. But like,
because I know a lot of cartoonists that they get the money and they're gone.
Yeah. Oh God, tell me about it. But it's like, if you like pre-ordered your book to 100 people and one person got irritated with you and reported you to PayPal, that could be the end of your account. That because people were a lot squirrelier about online payments back then, and PayPal they were much firmer about their policy.
I'll take you back in time. I did a crowdfunding thing that was even before the internet. Oh. And this was like in 92 or 93, and just as Bone was starting to get a little attention, and I was starting to talk to other cartoonists, and I met Dave Sim, who did Cerebus. And, and I was still very much struggling. And he said, what you need to do is you make a print, do a really nice drawing of your characters or some scene, and you only make 100 of them, but they're $100 a piece. Oh. So, and you advertise them in your book. And I think Dave might have let me advertise it in Cerebus as well, which would have been very helpful. So let me do the math. So that's like is that $10,000? Did I get that right? 100 times 100?
Sounds like 10,000 to me.
Well, I sold them all, and I made $10,000. And I've only seen one of them in all these years ever go up on eBay. So, and I didn't even have Photoshop. I had to use Chart Pack to make to do the letters pages and anything written inside. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's more that small business ingenuity, though.
Juicy, put up the slide about the Kickstarters.
Oh,
here's Toolcraft. So you were doing these little books. I bought these on your website. They're like $2.
No, don't do that.
This is everything I know, which I love this. I thought this was very good. It was basically, it didn't really tell you how to make a comic. It just told you all the shitty things that will happen if you try to make a comic. And then, of course, then you did the next one, which is let's kickstart a comic and not screw it up.
You want to know what inspired this one specifically?
Absolutely.
At the very, maybe first 2 or 3 years after Kickstarter became a thing and it became clear this wasn't some fly-by-night thing that was going to disappear tomorrow. It was just picking up steam and becoming more established, and a routine was kind of being established. I started seeing these things because, the Google Panopticon knows what you're doing at all times. And Kickstarter kept coming up, obviously, and where I was visiting online. So I began getting served all these ads, and the ads I was getting served were like, Kickstarter master course with person who has funded nearly $10,000 in projects, just $800 at the downtown Sheridan for a 3-day intensive course. And I was like, $800 to fund a Kickstarter? Hell with that. I'm going to just put together a little comic and charge a few bucks for it, because, there's no way that I am viscerally offended by people who take advantage of people because they are filled with hope and they don't know where to start with something. I don't know if I'm putting this in the right terms, but a lot of people look to Kickstarter, especially creative types, as the only means they're going to have to be heard in the world, because as I'm sure you don't need to be told, it's rough out there trying to get the attention of publishers. And it's especially difficult if what you make is, air quotes, not marketable. And a lot of people who make webcomics make stuff that they've been told over and over again isn't marketable, myself included. And so they feel their only option is crowdfunding, but maybe they're 22, fresh out of college, they don't have an audience, they don't have a portfolio of work that's been published, and they want to run a Kickstarter, they want to be heard, they want to make something that gets out there and finds their audience for them, but they're terrified they're going to launch a Kickstarter and it's going to fail. Like, first things first, a failed Kickstarter, not a big deal. I swear to you, anyone who's watching this who is terrified of launching a Kickstarter because, oh my God, what if it fails? It's not the end of the world. But number two, the thing that bugs me a lot is folks who are peddling this idea that there are cheat codes to life. And a lot of these people peddling this whole, I will help you fund your Kickstarter. I get emails from them to this day, because every time you launch a Kickstarter, your inbox is just filled. It's flooded with emails from these people who are preying on hope, who are just like, oh, I have a secret list of backers who will absolutely fund your Kickstarter, but they'll never see it unless you give me $50. Like, and that's essentially what the email breaks down to. And it's gross.
No, that's suspicious, right?
Yeah,
there.
I hate that. But the thing is, people fall for it because they're worried about what will happen if they don't reach for this, this chance. But
I've something I've kind of picked up from you. And what I've read about you is that you do have this kind of like desire to help people. You don't want to just do it yourself. You want to let people know how to do it. You have a history of actually trying to elevate people whose voices are not really that heard. And that's going to come up towards the end of our interview. So I don't want to talk about that yet, except for just this Kickstarter thing is like, you're the wonderkin. How did, do you still like talking about it, or are you just
God, no, I love talking about Kickstarter. Okay, I love it. No, because it's a beautiful democratization of access to audience. And for good or for ill, editors in sort of like the modern publishing landscape have become strictly optional. And everyone's got an opinion on that. And a lot of those opinions are totally valid, whatever. But it's worth remembering that a lot of what editors do is thoroughly subjective. And Iron Circus has been founded and prospered on publishing things I have personally been told no one wants and will never sell. A perfect example is Poorcraft, which is prior to getting international distribution. I moved 16,000 copies of that graphic novel by myself via online sales, exclusively online and convention sales. And I stopped counting at 16,000,
Good.
Because after
That's great.
It just felt weird going on.
That is fantastic. That's really good.
And that's not
very
counting
impressive.
digital sales either. Yeah, and I'm really proud of that. But that is a book that when I initially offered it to Diamond Distro, they told me.
I'm sorry. Finish.
I offered it to Diamond Distro, and they told me, it's like, yeah, we can't sell this. And I was like,
well, I ran into that obviously, and my solution for like who's going to do bone? Everybody looked at it and told me like that's a silly thing. Yeah. So self-publishing was it. If you have your idea and you're committed to it, it's your art. It's your art. And everybody in this audience, because we're being watched mainly by art students and the like. So hi guys. You know what we mean by that. So let's talk about your big. I don't know. Is it fair to call it your big breakthrough? Your big Kickstarter breakthrough? Smut Peddler. Is it Smut Peddler?
Smut Peddler is probably the reigning king of books people insisted nobody wanted. It was basically, I sat down and I made a wish list of artists that I would love to see draw porn. And I emailed them and I was like, hey, so I'm putting together this sex positive anthology and it's going to be very consent driven. And I was wondering if you wanted to participate. It's just like, yes, I'm going to just immediately bang, 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 bang. I got all the answers back. Like, obviously, yes, definitely.
Really? That's amazing. That's fantastic.
Like these people have been waiting by their inboxes for someone to ask them to draw dirty comics.
Well, I like that you called it sex positive, because I'm going to read the subtitle, which is impeccable pornoglyphics for cultivated ladies and men with exceptional taste.
Yes.
That's a great tagline. That's really good.
And we have like expanded beyond that now. Smut Peddler used to be primarily, we used to have gender requirements. We now currently do not have gender requirements for Smut Peddler,
I'm amazed, because I kind of was interested in that. But okay, well, let's talk about that. So, because I know from watching your YouTube videos that at first you did have a gender requirement. It either had to be by a woman or a woman had to be on the team.
Exactly. That was extremely important, because quite frankly, it was to stem the deluge of really terrible porn.
Yeah.
We got some bad submissions, and they were by guys who were like, okay, so I read the rules, but I'm special. It's like, no, you're genuinely not. I can tell you this right now from your submission. And it was like a lot of things I do, Smut Peddler was actually pretty reactionary. I liked reading dirty comics, but a lot of the dirty comics that were available were not super comfortable to read. They were sort of, they surprised you with really objectionable content, or they didn't, as far as I was concerned, focus on the right things or seem to even remotely care about the woman that was involved. And that irked me, that annoyed me. And Smut Peddler was kind of a challenge to that, because that was sort of like the overwhelming majority of comic smut that you could easily find. And Smut Peddler,
not just in comics, but in all of porn.
Absolutely.
It's almost unwatchable. It's not fun. It's just,
it's really not.
It's like, and I did think that was groundbreaking. It's amazing. As we entered into talking about porn, it reminds me of a Saturday Night Live bit where Seth Meyers was the boss, and he at Christmas would have the shelf elf come sit on his desk.
Yeah.
And the shelf elf would tell him, things he saw people do. And he says, oh. The shelf elf says, you know who watches porn? No, who watches porn, shelf elf? He goes, everybody. Your book was, I thought, was a bombshell, because
thank you.
It was fun. It's fun sex. It's the women are there because they want.
Everybody wants to be there,
or the two women, or the two guys, or whatever you've got going on in the story.
Yeah, exactly. And that was really important to me, that everybody who was there acted like they wanted to be there, and they were happy to be there, and they were like, yes, let's do this. And it's honestly, in retrospect, it's kind of sad that that's so rare. You know what I mean? That our selling point is everyone involved wants to be involved. It's like, oh God, that's really sad.
I'd like to point out the art that's on the screen right now. And I lost my note about the name of the artist and the story writer. But this is go back one, Jersey, please. That's because so there's a lot of science fiction besides there's just people meeting in real life in kinds of stories, but there's a lot of science fiction in it. And then this particular one, the artwork was just really blowing my way. And my glasses aren't good enough. Will you read her name for me, Spike?
I can't even, it says Liza Petruzzo.
Petruzzo. All right. Liza Petruzzo. So the art in this, and I looked her up. She does like erotic comics online. But go through this. Okay, so the science fiction element is while she's asleep at night, a meteor lands. The next morning, she goes down to the water's edge to bathe, and she sees someone. Now I'll go back one. I'm sorry. Go back, Jersey. So look at her. So she sees something moving, and look at that bottom frame. Look at that face.
Yeah,
that is
that's great.
that is a heck of a good drawing, a good cartoon drawing.
Yeah.
And you don't expect something like that in, erotica.
Yeah.
Okay, so go on, so forward.
Yeah.
And this is the alien that's there, and she learns
Mhm.
on the next page that anytime they touch, he could become more like her, or she could change him into being more human. And I was not able to go very far with this. There's only a couple more pages. That's it. That's the last one. But here she's like, oh, I have a little more control here. I can turn you into, and like she just touches him and gives him the hair, and now he's nearly human. And the next page is very, very titillating, but I was afraid that was a little too much in a public forum.
Yeah. I think there's this attitude, and I've seen it like literally articulated, just written in plain language on the internet, where people just go, oh, well, it's porn. It doesn't have to be creative. It doesn't have to be, outside the box. It doesn't have to be interesting. Just draw people fucking. That's all people want. And it's like, okay, cool. Universalizing your own subjective desires, but you are objectively wrong. It's like, there are people who do appreciate context for their adult comics, and there are people who appreciate context for their adult stories. Exhibit A, walk into literally any bookstore and partake of the entire wall full of pornographic books that, respectable women walk in and buy every day with Fabio on the cover. That's literally porn. That is just
I've never read any of that. So
romance novels are some of the filthiest smut that you could imagine. They are unbelievable.
Okay. Well, anyway, I'm going to get you into the, I know I could talk about porn all day. I know.
Oh, yeah.
I was getting ready for this interview. I'm actually doing an interview tomorrow with Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Connor. So this whole week I marked out for reading porn and Harley Quinn. That was my whole week. I was like, I love my job. But you have lots more besides besides the. So is this where you started getting interested in anthologies? Because anthologies I would think would be difficult.
Anthologies are way more difficult than publishing a single creator book. It's like cat herding scratches the surface of how hard it is. And part of the reason I still do them, because I say this all the time, I say this whenever I'm like super frustrated and like Iron Circus is having its, coordination meeting with, publicists, editors, etc. So it's like, I don't have to do this. I could stop doing this tomorrow. We have enough single creator books. But the thing is, I don't think I will, because anthologies are, number one, I'm a publisher. It's super important to me that I don't fossilize into one of these people that only publishes folks who are like around my age, you know what I mean? People who are of my generation, and I have no clue what 20-year-olds are doing. I don't ever want to be that publisher. And a really great way of seeing like what's out there, what's new, who just graduated, who just decided to take a crack at comics, is going through my anthology submissions, because I have gotten submissions from people and I've written them personal emails that are like, whoa, like we can't have you in this anthology because we just straight up ran out of space. But wow, your stuff is great. If you ever want to pitch a straight up graphic novel to me, let me know. And I wouldn't know that person was alive if they hadn't submitted to the anthology. So like, it's awesome. It's like having sort of the first line on all these people who are really eager to make comics and are really eager to have their first published work. And also, I really like the idea that a person who is new to comics, again, maybe not even necessarily super new, but a person who's trying to maybe make a professional living at comics can go to a convention and have a $20 or $30 book on their table, because that makes a world of difference. When I was just starting out in comics, I had that sort of stereotypical table that just had, stickers, postcards, prints, and, $1, $5, $10, sure, okay. But then when I started having books, suddenly I was, instead of hoping for like, a $5 sale or a $3 sale, it was a $12 sale, it was a $15 sale. And that made a world of difference. And frankly, it makes me feel good that there are people who get into Smut Peddler or any of my other anthologies, and they get to go to conventions and have $20 and $30 books on the table and actually make a profit and come home from the convention and pay the light bill or buy groceries with comic money. That's an incredible boost.
Well, you're talking right now to probably a large number of art students, and CCAD, Columbus College of Art and Design, is one of the few universities or colleges, I suppose, that has a program in comics. I think it's specific. It's more focused on the writing, but they have a group called Spitball where the students actually make an anthology, and it's super impressive. So here you're now talking to these students. Go ahead and tell them it's okay to be into comics, and tell them, give them some advice if you can.
Right now, this is the best imaginable time. By some accident of timing, by a alignment of the planets, you are making comics in the best time it has been to be making comics in North America in living memory. If you wanted right now, you could go out and you could start pitching to companies that would have laughed in Jeff and mine's faces just a decade or two ago. The idea that someone who is making comics can now pitch to Random House and HarperCollins and get multi-book deals with six-figure advances, not saying this is going to be you, chances say it won't be you, but it's happening, it's possible. That was unheard of when I was in my 20s. What was also unheard of is if you don't give a crap about publishing through HarperCollins or Random House or any others of these really big deal companies, you can go get a Patreon and you can work that up to something that pays all your bills, doing exactly what you want without editorial interference of any kind. You can just find your audience via social media, via art sites. Again, Webtoon was not a thing. All these other places, there were sites that comics were on when I was in my 20s, but the monetization route that is all laid out didn't exist. There is so much flexibility and there is so much access to potential audience right now that your timing could not be better. And if this is something you truly want to do, if you want to give this a crack, if you want to see if you can make a living making comics, I say go for it. I say go for it, but at the same time, have realistic expectations and understand sort of where you are in the ecosystem of the scene. It's fantastic. There's so much possibility. It's not going to be easy, but it has never been easier. So,
okay. We just got word that we're getting towards the end here. I just want to add to that it is a good way to go to try to do stuff on your own, is through the web. Get out to shows. I know we can't do that right now. And in fact, that's one of the reasons we established CXC was to help young people and get new people in there and have new people meet master cartoonists. And we've done that every year. We get someone who's brand new, and pretty soon you see them in the Billy Ireland or something, looking at artwork and chatting. You also have Art Spiegelman talking to Rafael Rosado, who does Monsters Beware, and they're having this intense conversation about some art. It's really cool. It makes me very happy. So getting out there and doing work is probably step one. And if you do want to talk to Random House, that kind of thing probably requires a lawyer, but
and an agent.
A lawyer and an agent, exactly. Mm-hmm. But having some work under your belt, and work that's good and work that you believe in, that's one of the most important things. Yeah. So if we're getting down to the wire here, I want to say to everybody, stick around, because after this invitation, there's going to be a live Q&A. All right, and you can just really ask us anything. So, but before that, there's a couple of books that you have published that are fantastic. I read this one just yesterday. It's called The Banned Book Club.
Yeah, that one is actually, it's if I can, sorry, it's just basically, it's another one of those miracle of timing things. And it's going to forever be the book I put centrally when people are all like, oh, social media is useless. Like, no, Banned Book Club exists because of social media. And that is because I am friends with Ryan Estrada, who's one of the co-authors, and he began tweeting one day about, you will not believe what my wife, Hyung Suk, you will not believe what my wife just told me. She told me she was at a banned book club in college, and like we've been married years, and she never mentioned this before. And I tweeted at him, I'm like, oh, that should be a comic, dude. And the next thing you know, we made it into a comic, and it's a memoir. It's real. It's probably been the most surreal experience I've had of 2020 because I've sold the licensing rights for it to be translated into Korean and published in South Korea, where it was, last I checked, outselling One Punch Man. And it's like one of those deals where it's like, anything I had anything to do with outselling One Punch Man is not a thing I thought I would experience anytime soon. But
I can top that. I've never even heard of One Punch Man. I don't even know what that is.
It's on Netflix. It's honestly, it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Okay.
But
well, I would like to, Jersey, go ahead. I picked out one quick sample because this is something that startled me, and I'm going to have to get close because of my glasses. I want to read this to you. This is, this actually takes place like in 40 years ago, or 1983.
The 83.
In South Korea. And there's a lot of student protesting going on, and the government had years before had slipped out of democracy and into pretty much tyranny. So they get these kids, they join a book club and reading only banned books, but they get raided. And like in the top picture here, you can see them trying to escape the raid, and there's tear gas coming out. And the last panel, which isn't actually, it got cut off here, but they're like pouring water in their eyes, just like you see now, like either in Hong Kong or here in the United States. But I want to, if I can read this, can you read that, Spike?
Sure. Which panel do you want me to read?
The second panel.
It goes, well, Hyung Suk is saying, how can Chun, who is the dictator, how can Chun trick everyone? How do people not see what's happening? And the guy she's with says, he doesn't care if we believe him or not. He created such a divide between the people who believe his lies and those who don't, that the country is too torn apart to come together and properly oppose him.
That froze my heart.
Yeah.
There you go. That's what sliding out of a democracy.
Yeah, they all use the same playbook, and it's mildly horrifying how effective it is.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And then I'd like just to ask you about this one last book here before we go. It's called As the Crow Flies.
Yeah.
And Melanie's actually an exhibitor at CXC this year. So, So anyone watching this, please go to the CXC website and go to the exhibitors, and you can actually click through and see what deals she has. You can actually go to her website and see what she's got. So So talk about this. How did you choose this project?
It was pretty easy. First of all, it's beautiful. There aren't a lot of cartoonists currently, and if you know of anyone out there, send them my way, who are working in colored pencil, and certainly not this masterfully. Melanie absolutely knocks it out of the park with their colored pencil work. And I follow them on Instagram, and sometimes they'll post sort of what's left of the colored pencil after they're done with it. And it's this little pathetic nub, like you're wondering where they actually grip it to draw. But it's beautiful, and I'm shallow. Aesthetics are important. And the thing that draws me into a story first is the aesthetics. So when I first saw Melanie's colored pencil work, I was like, oh my God, I have to keep going. And then the story is something I'm really fascinated by because in case anyone hasn't noticed, hi, I'm Black, how are you? And I grew up in a mostly white suburb. And the story is about a girl who is dropped off at a Christian summer camp, and she is the only Black girl at the Christian summer camp. And she's sort of kind of going through this whole thing where she's almost like hyper aware of like, okay, when is the other shoe gonna drop? When is this gonna get super uncomfortable and fucked up? And the problem with being sort of the only Black person in the room in a lot of situations like that, and quite frankly, this is not exclusively Black, like this happens to a lot of people who are marginalized, like the only woman in the room, the only queer person in the room, the only disabled person in the room, the only autistic person in the room. This can happen in a lot of ways where something just sort of happens that is like, it brings into high relief how you are not being considered in the current conversation. And it just sort of sails past. And before you even decide whether or not to address it, it's gone. It was 3 minutes ago. And that happens a lot as the crow flies. And while it's like, it never puts it in these exact terms at all, one of the things that also drew me to it was it has a very strong undertone of second wave feminism versus third wave feminism, because one of the conceits of the camp that Charlie, the girl, is attending is that it is a Christian summer camp that is based on a tradition that was come up by these frontier pioneer women who would have a Christian retreat in the mountains every year. And they would go up there to pray and sort of reestablish their relationship with God and so on and so forth. But the thing is, Charlie is sitting there looking at all this and listening to this story going, okay, cool. Did they take their kids? No, they didn't take their kids. So who was looking after their kids? Right. Okay. The slave women who are not included, but we're literally not even going to acknowledge that, are we? So it's like, it's got that level on it. And also there are other things which I do not want to go into because it is literally a spoiler, where it also sort of comments on how there are people who they think of themselves as progressive and challenging of sort of casual prejudice in social relationships, who are actually themselves not quite as progressive as they think they are. And not going into detail because you should just read it. It's
I feel good about this, Spike. It was really nice. Thank you so much for,
thank you for
coming here and talking to us tonight.
It's such a thrill to talk to you. You're fucking amazing, dude.
Thank you. But I want to thank all the, I want to thank CCAD. I want to thank all the staff there who have let us do this, let us be part of their event for CXC. I want to thank Lauren McCubbin, who arranged this with you.
Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. I think Lauren's going to be moderating our Q&A afterwards. So again, everybody, stick around, and afterwards there's going to be a live Q&A. Spike, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now let's get our panelists back in here, and I will exit the room. Hello, Lauren.
Hi, how you doing?
Dude, okay, that was a fantastic talk. Is Spike still here?
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry.
Spike
It's
just
like
unmuted.
literally the instant you started talking, my webcam fell down. So I've okay, let me see if I can.
I'm sorry, Spike.
Hey, so while Spike is adjusting her webcam so that we can just see the top of her head, which is fantastic.
Okay, if I.
Oh, there you are.
I'm gonna.
All right. I'm going to step aside and turn the floor over to you. Thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Spike.
That's good enough.
Hey, everybody. So I'm super excited to be here with Spike. And again, if you guys have any questions or anything that you want to talk to Spike about, you can go ahead and pop something into the Q&A or type something in the chat, and we will be happy to talk about it. But before we get started with that, Spike, I wanted to congratulate you on your newest Kickstarter triumph with Patience and Esther. You want to tell us a little bit about that and how that came to be?
Yeah, and fun tidbit on that. That is by Sarah Winifred Searle. It's called, the full title, Patience and Esther, an Edwardian Romance. And
Lovely.
Women-loving women period graphic novel about Edwardian England, both the countryside and the city. But when it was in production, it was not called Patience and Esther, an Edwardian Romance. It was called Sparks. And here's some fun publisher trivia. We had to have a talk with the creator going, we cannot call this book Sparks because that is the name of a best-selling children's graphic novel in Canada. And the last thing we want is people going into their wholesale order site and just Sparks, and then what they get is pornography when they wanted like a cute cat and dog adventure for kindergartners.
Yeah.
So we had to have like a talk about what is this book really going to be named at the end of the day, because Sparks is not what it's going to be named.
Yeah. But Patience and Esther, I think, is a fantastic name. In the Edwardian romance, it's like you should have just put Downton Abbey but hot on there.
Yeah,
Super good.
I really loved all the detail that Sarah put in. Like, if you read the book, there's bits in it about how Patience shows up and she's a simple country girl and she's trying to learn to go into service. And like one of my favorite things ever, and I know this sounds like kind of hypocritical because I love comics as a medium, and I've said before that I think you should be able to parse pretty much everything on the page without it being explained to you somewhere along the line in blocks of text. And I still believe that, but I love extras and I love creator commentary. I love it. I love it. I love it. There are things you don't need to understand to enjoy the story, but having the creator sort of relate, that little extra goodies. Sarah did a ton of research for this book, and like it shows up on the comics page, but also in the footnotes in the back. And there are things like when Esther shows up and when Patience shows up and she's being sort of given the grand tour of the estate and being told, okay, here's your uniform. You have to wear pink in the mornings and you have to wear black in the evenings. And since you're the last servant hired, you're the one who basically is the servant for the servants. You have to sweep and you have to mop and you have to, carry out everyone's privy, and you have to do this, that, and the other. And you have to serve the head housemaid her breakfast in bed, and she gets up at 7, which means you are up at 6. And it's just, there's the level of care that went into basically an adorable porno book is very nice, and it's like exactly my bag. Like all this context is my deal. I love it.
I cannot wait to read it. That sounds fantastic.
We have a question I didn't even see.
Yeah, so actually we have a question in the Q&A. How can you tell a story is something that people would want to read?
Yeah, okay. I'm going to be kind of brutal here, in that I think if your move, and by the way, this has one of the most massive exceptions I could possibly think of. I don't believe it's always a good idea, or even usually a good idea, to sit down and go, okay, what do other people want? And then try to commit yourself to a story like that from beginning, middle, end. I think that a lot of really mediocre stuff gets made that way. However, at the same time, I have to admit, I am aware of a guy who went on Usenet. Maybe you can still find his posts. And he went, okay, basically, I mean, we're all adults in here, right? Fuck this. I'm tired of just sort of making it in writing. I'm going to write a bestseller. Everybody, what aspects of a bestseller are out there? When you think bestseller, what's in it? And everyone on Usenet was like, well, you need a princess. And she needs to be magical. Some dragons too. Oh, you need a big war. Yeah, you need a big war. And there's got to be like people have to be fighting for a throne. That's what everybody wants. You need princesses and dragons and fighting for a throne. Yeah, monsters too, like scary monsters. Yeah, you need. And he was like, thanks. Then he wrote Game of Thrones.
Oh no!
Or rather, excuse me, A Song of Ice and Fire, I should say.
Oh yes. Oh yeah.
That supposedly is how, because George R.R. Martin has a ton of track record before A Song of Ice and Fire. A ton. He's been around for a long time. And supposedly, from what I've heard, he went on Usenet and went, it's time to write a bestseller. I'm getting old. So what's in bestsellers, everybody? And they told him, and he wrote it. Like, one of the things I realized a while ago was he also wrote one of my favorite episodes of Amazing Stories, like in the 80s, which is about a guy who brings back tiny sapient life from Mars and like cultivates it in his shed, and they start worshiping him as a god. It's weird. It's really good. I forget the title, but it's good. I'm sure if you go on IMDb, you'll see it. But anyway, knowing what people read, I believe there's a niche audience out there for pretty much anything. And I believe what matters more to a successful story is what you have a passion about, and less about, people would want this to happen, people would want that to happen. Because like, if you ask 10 people what they want in a story, you're going to get 11 answers. There are people who are exclusively here for like the zero risk, zero drama coffee shop AU where everyone's just super cute at each other for 10 pages. And then there are people who are over here for the high drama and they want the warfare and they want the battles. And then there are people over here who, you know, their favorite character in Game of Thrones was Littlefinger and they love the intrigue and they love the clever bits. And so what people want is honestly less important than what I feel you think is an interesting story.
I mean, especially for a graphic novelist, you're going to be working on that for 2 years. It's got to be something you love.
Yeah.
You know, that's going to like, otherwise it'll kill you. Okay, so another question.
Recommendation, someone here is asking.
Weird history recommendation.
I'm really, really bad about books in that 90% of what I read is nonfiction. I read some fiction, but not a ton. I have like 3 fiction authors I'm super into and that's it. So what I'm reading, you know what? Oh, my phone isn't here. Let's see if I can recall. There is a professor of history named Mary Beard who writes a lot about the Roman Empire, and all of her books are amazing. I love all of her books. I recently finished a book called Get Well Soon, which is about illness in history in general. If you have the constitution for it, and if you don't, that is not a value judgment. If you have the constitution for it, one of my favorite reads recently was called Cancer, the Emperor of All Maladies. And it's basically the history of cancer in society written by an oncologist. Ooh. And it's wild. It's really interesting. There's another one called Rabid, which I just finished reading. And it's so good because it's about how quickly human beings forget, like utterly and completely, the threats of yesteryear. Like rabies has been this thing that stalked humanity for thousands of years and was a subject of horror and terror. And, you know, it was a thing that constantly lurked in the background. Like imagine one day, you know, little Frou-Frou, your favorite dog ever, who loves you with all his heart and soul, he just turns around and bites you in the face. And you suddenly understand you have 3 weeks to live, period. You know, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. And not only do you have 3 weeks to live, your death will be horrible. And that's what rabies was. And it was the inspiration for so much of our mythology, like werewolfism and vampirism are probably rooted in rabies. There are references like to like the concept. Everyone here plays role-playing games. They're familiar with the concept of like the berserker, like a person in battle who just goes around just reducing other people to a fine mist. Like there's a lot of theory that this is sort of canonically like connected to the concept of rabies. It's like rabies has had this amazing footprint on society, but then Louis Pasteur figured out a vaccine, and the next thing you know, people are like, "Oh, that thing raccoons get sometimes." Right. That's the length and the breadth of it. One of the things you'll find, I love history. History is one of my favorite things. I'm kind of notorious among friends that if I start discussing certain aspects of history, I actually begin crying because I feel so strongly about it. Like ancient Egypt, there's an accountant in ancient Egypt who has a very beautifully done tomb that I'm super into him. I'm super into him and his tomb with his pet cat and his children and this beautiful afterlife that he has made for himself. But yeah, I read a ton of nonfiction. And there was another one recently too about plague. I read about a lot of diseases. I don't need to, but I do. But the only like fiction I read, and if I were to recommend like a fiction series to you, there's an author recently deceased named Ian M. Banks, and he wrote something called He wrote something called the culture novels. And let me just set the stage for you because it's fucking incredible. Yeah. The Culture, that's just what it's called. The Culture. It is a post-scarcity, post-need, post-political society where everyone gets exactly what they want whenever they want it. There is zero suffering. There is zero restraint. You can do exactly what you want at all times. If you wake up one morning and you say, I want 20 penises, you can go get 20 penises. If you want to be immortal, you can be immortal. If you say to yourself, everything kind of sucks right now, I want to be put into a coma for 400 years and the entire time I want to be dreaming about how I am a dragon. You can do that. And the culture is this massive insurmountable force where not only are all these humanoid people members of it, and it's like wildly ridiculously advanced to the point where its technology is indistinguishable from magic, like that's the culture, but also a lot of the AI, all the AI frankly, is considered citizens. They are equal citizens to, you know, meet people. And a great example of that is there are ships in the culture who don't want anybody living on them. So they don't have anyone living on them because that's their right to say no. So they're just like empty ships going around in space with vastly superior than human intellect. Yeah. And if there's one objectionable thing about the culture, it's that they have a strong belief, since they live so well and everything they do is so good, everyone else should live that way too. And they do not ask your permission to help you live that way. And in your mind, you're like, oh, fuck, I'd love to live like the culture, but maybe you wouldn't. And if you say no, they don't really care. So the one thing the culture kind of actively does to exert its force on the universe is go around converting other planets to the culture. And that's what a lot of the culture novels are about. And my very, very favorite one, if you're going to start with the one, in my opinion, what you should start with is something called The Player of Games. It is my favorite culture novel. It's yeah. So just go at Ian M. Banks. Ian is spelled I-A-I-N. So it's a little unusual. Ian M. Banks, The Player of Games. Just go get that. It's anyway.
Super good. Okay. We have
now back to like actually being on topic.
We have time for one more question here from Facebook. How do you find your audience, especially with less Comic-Cons now?
Well, it's important to note that I think less Comic-Cons is right now it's temporary. So, you know, hold on to that. That's important. But an important way to find your audience is being productive, being prolific, and quite frankly, taking advantage of social media as much as possible. Let's say what you love more than anything is Gothic Lolita fashion, okay? If you love it, chances are you know where the Gothic Lolita Facebook group is, or the Gothic Lolita Instagram tags, the ones that are really active where they are. And you know people who love Gothic Lolita art on Twitter, and you know what tags they use. So your duty, and even if it feels a little gross, because I know a lot of people are kind of object rather to self-promotion that is sort of like nakedly self-promotion, and they kind of really want to live in this world where it's a meritocracy and they'll be noticed just because they're good and that's all it'll be. No, you got to make your art, you got to sign it, and you got to put your URL on it. Like if you have a Pillow Fort or a Twitter or an Instagram or whatever, put that on there. Maybe Instagram, especially because, you know, seems like everybody's got an Instagram. It's a really visual medium. So that's where, as a cartoonist, kind of that's your best bet these days. And make sure when you post something, you're posting as often as you can without a decrease in quality. Yeah, we can all sit and noodle over a picture for 2 weeks. But if you ever want your heart broken, noodle over something until you think it's kind of barely acceptable, and then noodle for a further 2 weeks and show that to someone who is familiar with your art and go, can you tell the difference? Because a lot of times they'll be all like, the eyelashes, like only you are looking that close, and it'll hurt your fucking heart, but it's the truth. It's the truth. Yeah. So like kind of find this acceptable level between time investment and you are okay with this being in the world and being seen to be yours, and err on the side of it's okay. It's good enough. Good enough is something you're going to need to learn to master, especially if you're a cartoonist. You can absolutely spend weeks on a page. Sure thing. Absolutely. But the return on your time investment, especially since I think most people cannot whip out super high quality pages, like 2 or 3 a week, it's going to be something that's going to be a real element, like how quickly you can get it done. If you've ever read comics, and when I mean like comics, I mean like monthly periodical type stuff, and you're like, why do they keep hiring this guy? This guy's so clearly,
because he gets it done.
Porn. What is this? Why does he keep getting work? As a publisher, I can tell you exactly how he keeps getting work. He answers his emails. He hits every deadline. He's easy to work with.
Yeah.
There's
And
your answer.
I'm
That's why I
sorry.
consider it.
I'm so sorry. We have to wrap up now.
Oh.
There's another stream coming right after us.
Thank you for
Spike,
coming, everyone.
It was such a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me, Lauren.
You've been amazing.
Thank
you so
you.
much.
Thank you for watching, everyone. I really appreciate it. Bye-bye.